Om Sahanavavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. We are reading from the book Meditation and Spiritual Life by Swami Yatiswarananda. We are currently in the chapter titled Practice of the Presence of God, chapter 26. We are starting the section Work and Worship. At first, the aspirant may feel some difference between work and worship, though he carries on both in a spirit of surrender. Then he finds that he is able to carry on his inner worship even in the midst of all his duties. Finally, all his work becomes a worship. At first, we must make our activities as selfless as possible by offering the fruits of our work to the divine. Later on, we learn to work as instruments in his hands. Our whole life then becomes one of undivided consecration. Work and worship must go hand in hand. Both affect the purification of our mind and help in the unfoldment of higher consciousness. They are to be looked upon as a twofold spiritual discipline, inseparable from each other. No man or woman should neglect his or her duties in the name of meditation. If we work remembering the Lord all the while, we may not need so much of private meditation. What is most important is that the aspirant should always be in touch with the divine in some form or other. One of the best means of achieving this is to repeat the mantra mentally even while engaged in routine work. Let the wheel of japa continuously turn within us, as Swami Brahmananda ji has advised us. So this is from The Eternal Companion by Swami Prabhavananda, published in 1965, page 181. Always take the help of the sound symbol. Fill up your idle moments with the name of the Lord. Whenever any opportunity for service arises, we should take it up, and that ungrudgingly. Otherwise, the soul shrinks. Do not seek more work, but render service if there is any occasion. We grow through giving, not through receiving. The receiver must be a giver, the giver of something. Never allow yourselves to become beggarly. Be detached, but be fully sympathetic. Render help wherever you can, but without attachment, realizing that you are not the agent. Sometimes we think that if we try to help others spiritually, that would be posing as a guru. That is not true if there is no feeling of vanity or superiority in us. It is service, and we should never allow ourselves to shrink from her service when the opportunity or need for rendering it arises. In order to convert work into worship, first of all, one should try to culture the spiritual mood with japa and meditation. When a person takes up a work, he cannot think of God all the time. So let him remember Him at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end of the work, thinking that he is doing the work as a form of service to Him in order to please Him. As one succeeds in taking this first step, one can remember the Lord even in the midst of work. The mind has got two currents, the upper one and the lower one. Usually the lower one is filled with useless thoughts. This undercurrent of the mind can be trained to think of the Lord as one performs the work allotted to one, and remembering at the same time that one is working for His sake. This prevents the work from becoming mechanical and also prevents the mind from being occupied with worldly thoughts. Sometimes, due to force of circumstances, one has to do an excess of work. But if one's mind is properly trained, one can still find it possible to think of God even in the midst of intense activity. For this, regular preliminary discipline is necessary. Now, how to make the mind feel convinced that the Lord is the only doer? Through work and worship, you must first realize the presence of the Lord the soul of your soul, and then you can easily feel His will and His power that is working through your body and mind and through everything in this universe. This takes us to the ideal of dedication. The word means offering one's soul, mind and body to the Supreme Spirit, praying to be an instrument in His hands for serving His cause, and trying to promote the welfare of all, and along with that, striving for the salvation of one's own self. The central idea should be to love and serve God in man, and thus realize the highest goal of human existence. The service may be physical, intellectual, moral, or spiritual, according to the needs of those who come in close touch with us. As I have already said, along with work, one must also think of the Lord and offer all activities to Him. They alone become mechanical, who forget the Lord and the goal of attaining Him and work like machines. The trouble is not so much with the quantity of work as with the inability to do it in a spirit of dedication to God. There cannot be any dedication unless the goal of self-realization is kept constantly in view and the little ego is sacrificed and merged in the divine consciousness. The person who says that in dedication one has to sacrifice everything and obey others, whether right or wrong, has not understood the spirit of dedication, or even if he has, is not able to express the ideal properly. As one succeeds in practicing real dedication, the ego is not so much killed as transformed. The individual consciousness is united with the divine consciousness, and the individual will becomes one with the divine will. One feels that one's body is a part of the cosmic body. Such a person can never become mechanical. On the contrary, he leads a cosmocentric life instead of an egocentric life. Whatever be the nature of the work you may be doing, think that you're doing everything as a form of service to the Lord who dwells in you, in everybody. In the 18th chapter of the Gita, Lord Krishna says that one can attain spiritual illumination by worshipping the Supreme Spirit with one's duty. So this is from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, shloka 46. Yataf pravrittir bhutana yena sarvam idantatam swakarmana tam abhyarchya siddhim vindati manavah. And the meaning of the verse is, through one's duty, worshipping Him from whom is the creation of the beings, by whom all this is pervaded, a human being attains success. Any honest work, however humble, may be looked upon as a form of service to the Lord and thus can be performed with detachment. Next section, intensity needed. There are three kinds of activity: unconscious activity without any definite aim, conscious activity with a definite aim, and the activity carried on with a higher form of consciousness along with ordinary consciousness. And we should never stop short of the third one. We should learn to work without losing contact with higher consciousness. Here no new capacity for work is created, but the old one is given a new and better turn. Nothing new is brought in from outside, but there is a new inner awareness which is our own inherent nature. Through intense spiritual effort, we can create an undercurrent in the mind which flows on towards the divine even when the rest of the mind is engaged in work. Thus, there are two currents flowing in the mind. Such a conscious splitting of the mind is possible and is essential for the continuity of spiritual life. Through steady spiritual practice, we will be able to have a larger part of our mind under control, and the more we can do this, the more efficiently can we divide our mind into two, and the more efficiently can we practice the presence of God in the midst of all our duties. Ordinarily, the undercurrent is an unconscious stream filled with all sorts of useless things. What we have got to do in meditation is to try to make the upper current and the undercurrent one. And then during work, The undercurrent should be made to flow along some higher channel, along some higher constructive lines as much as possible. We must modify the contents of the lower current. We must bring them to the conscious plane. When we do this, we get a good portion of our mind at our command, and at the same time, we come to have a more intense and wide-awake mind. This is an important discipline in the life of a spiritual aspirant. Spiritual life means more and more of mental awakening, the awakening of the higher mind, ultimately leading to the attainment of superconsciousness. Just steady your mind and its movements dispassionately while doing your work. Watch it and see how it is busying itself with all sorts of useless and sometimes even harmful things. You can then have conscious control over the mind to a great extent, and through steady and prolonged practice, you'll find that the brain fibers have, as it were, become lighter and have lost much of their resistance. Both physical and psychical obstructions have to be counteracted as much as possible to clear the way to the goal of superconsciousness. Next section, sharing with others. We try to gain something for ourselves and then try to share it with others. At the beginning, greater stress may be laid on our inner growth, but the welfare of others is not to be lost sight of. First of all, we must have an amount of preparation, otherwise we cannot even serve others efficiently. Let us first strive to be divine ourselves and then help others to be divine. But these two must go together. When one has promoted one's own spiritual progress to some extent, only then can one work for others, and that in an efficient way. When Swami Vivekananda said, "I do not care for my own salvation," this is from The Life of Swami Vivekananda by Eastern and Western Disciples, published in 1974, page 487. So when Swami Vivekananda said, "I do not care for my own salvation," he had attained his salvation already. After having attained the highest spiritual state, he worked for others. If the Lord keeps us in a higher mood and gives us the strength to do His service, let us go in for it. This form of service takes us nearer the goal. Sometimes one has to remain in a higher mood, not only for one's own sake, but also for the sake of others. This serves as an additional impetus to spiritual practice. Unless you have something, what are you going to give? So sometimes not out of our own earnestness, but out of necessity, we have to gather more because more is to be distributed. This is the ideal for all of us, to try to promote our own welfare as well as that of others. And really speaking, the two can never be separated. Through service, there comes a sense of unity more and more. To the extent the sense of ego is stressed less, the sense of unity asserts itself more and more. And finally, we come to realize the divine in all men and women, in the whole outer and inner world. Next section, change of attitude towards the world. Even before this unity is actually attained, one has to feel it, imagine it in the course of one's sadhana, spiritual practice. Without the help of a vivid imagination of reality, work may become dangerous. When you work in the world, you have to move and live with people. It is therefore essential that you establish a spiritual outlook in the beginning. So the aspirant must take the help of imagination. Patanjali says in his Yoga Sutras, to obstruct the thoughts which are inimical to yoga, contrary thoughts should be brought in. So this is Patanjali Yoga Sutra 2.33. Vitarka bodhane pratipaksha bhavanam. Vitarka bodhane pratipaksha bhavanam. So, whenever a bad thought or bad imagination rises in the mind, bring in the contrary good thought. Good imaginations of the right kind should replace bad imagination. This is not the ultimate solution, but this is all that most people can do in the beginning. It is like taking the help of the police to drive away the robbers. But when we reach a safe place, we don't need the help of the police anymore. So until we get realization, we must take the help of good imaginations. Without that, we cannot live in this world and attain spiritual progress. However, We should see that imagination does not take a wrong path. It should be based on discrimination and renunciation and on the nature of the self. Your attitude towards others depends on your attitude towards yourself. If you look upon yourself as a body, you see only human bodies all around you. If you look upon yourself as the luminous self inhabiting the body, you will see the same light shining in all beings around you. Unless we are prepared to face the evil someday and see the divine even in that, our problem is not solved. We should learn to lay greater stress on the substance than on the form, greater stress on the principle than on good and evil. We go on busying ourselves with good and evil without caring for the principle which is beyond both good and evil. We should say, forms are not important to me, I care more for the substance. There are some worshippers of Shiva who associate all women with the goddess Parvati and all men with Shiva, the great god, and then merge finally the goddess and god into the principle out of which they come. Thus, these worshippers solve many problems. What a difference it will make if a person looks upon all women as the goddess and all men as the great god. There are some devotees who associate all men with Sri Ramakrishna's form and all women with the Holy Mother's form, and then finally transcending them, reach the principle which stands at the back of both. Only thus can our problems be really solved. Now, at our present stage, disturbing thoughts and evil forms may be brushed aside, but this can never be the solution. There must come a time when we see the one at the back of both good and evil, and then good and evil will cease to affect us. And if you are really able to look at these physical forms as manifestations of the formless and never as primary realities, if you are able to look at matter as a manifestation of thought and thought as a manifestation of infinite consciousness, then we can see everything in its right place, in its true setting. Then we are no longer deceived by the physical or mental forms as such. Such an attitude is essential for the practice of the presence of God. Physically, we must be in tune with the infinite physical universe, mentally with the infinite mental universe, and spiritually with the infinite Supreme Spirit. And then we see everything in its proper place, in the proper light, and act accordingly. The finite should always be in tune with the infinite, and that on all the different planes, in all the different forms of consciousness. One should feel the presence of God always at all levels. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.